This is Canadian Cult Cinema. Shivers is a 1975 body horror film, and it's the debut movie from David Cronenberg. It was released in the US under the name They Come From Within. Shivers takes place in an ultra-modern apartment building outside of Montreal. The apartment is on an island and is self-sustaining. There is a high-end restaurant, a store, armed security, and even a doctor's office.
Ow!
Shooting in one location may have been for budgetary reasons, but the apartment building almost is a character in itself. The film opens with Dr. Hobbs killing his teenage mistress. Hobbs was experimenting with parasites for use in transplants. The parasites would work with the body to perform the task of a failed organ. But Hobbs believes that humanity has become over-rational and lost contact with its flesh and instincts. So he develops the parasite to perform more as a combination of an aphrodisiac and a venereal disease.
Hungry for love. I'm hungry for love.
You see, Dr. Hobbs was using his mistress as a guinea pig and killed her to put an end to his experiment. But unbeknownst to him, his mistress was also very popular with some of the men in the apartment building.
Miss Perkins, I understand that you got these lumps from a young lady, is that right? I mean, what makes you think that?
Well, she had some just like them. Right here, near her belly button. You could push them around, too. I thought it was kind of sexy myself.
She unwittingly infected her partners with the parasites, and now they are crawling out of the men and infecting everyone in the apartment building, turning them into sex-crazed maniacs. We spend most of the movie following Dr. Roger St. Luc, the apartment building resident physician, as he tries to figure out what's going on. He and his nurse try to help some of the infected, but end up getting overwhelmed, and then they just try to escape the apartment building without getting infected themselves.
That even dying is an act of eroticism.
Shivers is important in the history of Canadian film for several reasons. First of all, it's David Cronenberg's debut feature. Cronenberg is one of Canada's most important filmmakers, and he's synonymous with body horror. A lot of his films focus on it, like Rabid, Videodrome, and probably the most successful use of body horror, The Fly. Cronenberg made some short films, as well as doing some TV work for the CBC, before going to work on Orgy of the Blood Parasites, later to be known as Shivers. David Cronenberg tried getting a job directing one of Cinepix's softcore maple syrup porns. Cinepix was a Canadian production company ran by John Dunning and Andre Link. Cronenberg met with John Dunning, but didn't get the job directing the softcore flick Loving or Laughing. Dunning did like his script for Shivers, though. Cinepix took the script to the CFDC, the Canadian Film Development Corporation. The CDFC initially turned them down. They would later come around and help fund the film, and this would go on to cause some controversy. Cronenberg sent the script to several Hollywood companies, even Roger Corman's New World Pictures. Cronenberg even traveled to California to meet with one of Corman's representatives. While in LA, Cronenberg met with a young Jonathan Demme, the man who would go on to direct The Silence of the Lambs. Cronenberg told him about the trouble he was having finding funding for Shivers. Demme told him that he had not only read the script for Shivers, but Cinepix approached him about directing it. Cronenberg returned to Canada furious, but was greeted by Cinepix with the news that the CFDC had agreed to fund the film with him as director. David Cronenberg said he then realized he had 15 days to learn how to make a movie. He also said that his first production meetings were a bluff. He just sat there and nodded because he didn't know what was going on. Cinepix surrounded the young director with some more experienced people, like Ivan Reitman, who would act as the line producer. The film had a 15-day production schedule and was shot mostly at Montreal's Nuns Island apartment complex. During the shoot, Cronenberg lived in one of the apartment suites. It was the same suite that was used by the FX team, and his bed was often damp with fake blood. The film was released in October of 1975 in Canada, and while it wasn't a box office smash, it did do well. It made money for the CFDC, which a lot of Canadian films didn't. You see, the CFDC was publicly funded, meaning it was paid for by taxpayer dollars. This fact, coupled with Shivers' subject matter, seemed to rub one Canadian journalist the wrong way. Robert Fullard, writing as Marshall Delaney, described the content of Shivers in the pages of the national magazine Saturday Night. Fullard's headline read, "You should know how bad this movie is. You paid for it." He called it crammed with blood, violence, and depraved sex, and said it was the most repulsive film he had ever seen. This scathing review hurt Cronenberg's relationship with the CFDC. It took him 2 years to get funding for his next film, Rabbit. Shivers is not Cronenberg's best work, but it is an important piece of Canadian cinema, and it's an interesting look at what the celebrated director would become. I would like to mention Selim Vatndal's book, They Came From Within, A History of Canadian Horror Cinema. I got a lot of information for this review in there, and it's just a fantastic read. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that like and share button. Remember to check out some of our previous episodes and hit subscribe. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and until next time, see ya.